welcome to Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 123 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 49 of A Clash of Kings, that's Tyrion 11.
As always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information that will be particularly helpful if you are not reading along with us. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
I've been off for a good bit longer than you have. So
yes, we had a week off, and we thank our listeners for their patience for the week off. It's Christmas time here, so we're taking a little time with our families. That's right. It's been very welcome.
Yes, I've been off I can't say I've been off from podcast work. I have been doing podcast work, but not as much as normal. But also I've been off from my day job as well, which is is nice.
Yes, that is nice to get a break. So I had, as you know, I was very busy in the lead up to the Christmas break at our work.
Yes,
and in the middle of it all, I had to have because I am of a certain age, I had to have a colonoscopy.
Always fun.
Well, you don't know. You don't know anything.
My grandfather died of colon cancer, so I've been getting them since I was.
Oh, you've been.
I've had two. I'll say I've had two.
Oh, how about that? Well. So it's not an entirely pleasant experience. Although actually the colonoscopy itself is a complete non-event.
It's the lead up.
It's the lead up to the colonoscopy.
That's miserable.
Yes, that's pretty miserable. So the reason I bring it up is because A, I have no filter, and B,
I thought I was the oversharer.
But what I discovered was we have a hierarchy of toilet paper in our house. So Carson basically has one bathroom to herself, and me and Lucas share the other bathroom.
Okay,
Okay. Now, I always thought that we all had the same grade of toilet paper.
Right.
But when I took the meds that you have to take in preparation for the colonoscopy, Carson came from her bathroom with this, on a velvet cushion, this roll of toilet paper that seemed to shine in the light. And she said, "You'll be needing this." So apparently she gets to use this sort of glorious, expensive stuff that me and Lucas can only dream of.
You guys have the single ply.
Exactly. Who knew?
Well, her secret's out now.
Yeah, exactly. She's hoping that I don't remember because of the drugs.
Right. But... No. You're not going to forget that kind of toilet paper.
Yes. So, can't recommend the experience, but, everyone... Be careful of your health.
Right.
Get yourself checked whenever
That's
you
right.
should.
Right. So I had, we had some of Stacy's family came and visit us over the Christmas weekend. And, they came about 8 hours because they're coming from Western Pennsylvania. And they get here, and my nephew, who's 20, discovers that he forgot to pack shoes.
Shoes? But he was wearing shoes.
No, he only had slippers on.
Oh.
He had 0 shoes. How does one forget to pack shoes?
Yeah, that one is tricky.
Yeah.
I've forgotten all kinds of things, but the things that you have to wear for the journey, I've never forgotten those.
Right. Yes, I know. That was a new one to me. I thought I'd mention that because I can't say I've ever heard of someone forgetting to pack shoes before.
We went skiing once, and we left a bag full of all of our winter clothes.
Kind of useful.
Yeah, the thing you would most need for a skiing trip.
Yeah,
everything you would wear to ski was left in a bag at home.
Yeah, I remember one time Molly came to swim practice, but she came straight from school, so she hadn't put normally she'd come with her suit underneath, shorts and a t-shirt, or depending on the weather. But she came straight from school, and it was the first time she had come straight from school to swim practice. And so she gets onto the pool deck and starts to take off her shirt, and then realizes, oh, wait a second. This would be a really bad idea right now. So, wardrobe malfunctions, I guess.
All right. Yes. All right, let's get down to business. How did we leave Tyrion Lannister? Last we saw of Tyrion, he was plotting to pervert Cersei's plan to remove Tommen from the increasingly vulnerable King's Landing in favour of Tyrion's own people looking after the young prince. Not a huge interference, but inevitably going to cause some bad blood with Cersei. He also arranged for Shae to be brought inside the Red Keep to act as handmaiden to Lollys Stokeworth, but he did hit Shae and blubbed his innermost secrets to her, causing himself great shame. Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
Okay. Tyrion has a teary goodbye with Shagga as the clansmen sail off across the Blackwater with the rest of the Stone Crows. The rest of the clans have already departed ahead of them. They're headed for the Kingswood, with the assignment of harassing Stannis' men marching toward King's Landing. Tyrion feels naked without his clansmen protecting him.
He's not without fighting men. Tyrion has 6,000 gold cloaks and an army of 800 sellswords that Bronn has amassed. However, his concern regards the loyalty and bravery of the men. He's offered knighthoods to the sellswords after they win the impending battle, but Bronn cautions Tyrion that they'll kill for knighthoods, but they won't die for it. Jacelyn Bywater similarly cautions Tyrion about the gold cloaks. Of the 6,000, only a quarter are seasoned for battle. The rest will break and run at the first sign of trouble.
Tyrion takes in the scene around the Mudgate. Lean-tos and shanties have popped up everywhere from the river to the walls. Citing an advantage to Stannis' men as they storm the walls, he commands Bronn to burn it all. Bronn doesn't figure the people who own the hovels will like that much. Tyrion says add it to the list of things that they can curse him for. He does ask that Bronn prevent his men from murder or rape, as these people aren't the enemy.
But setting them on fire is okay. Surveying the city walls reminds him that huge walls don't always mean safety. He thought the Starks would be safe in Winterfell, and was shocked to learn that the Ironborn have taken that castle. He thinks Robb will have to turn north now to defend his homeland, meaning a reprieve for the west. But despite it all, he can't help but feel for the Starks. Although he can't imagine Theon Greyjoy holding it for long, a Stark will always be the Lord of Winterfell.
When Tyrion returns to the Tower of the Hand, he's met by a group of trader captains angry about the seizure of their ships. Tyrion apologizes and promises payment for their troubles. They aren't moved by the offering. He then hurries to the castle sept to watch two new members of the Kingsguard be initiated. Sirs Balon Swann and Osmund Kettleblack will don the white cloaks. Tyrion approves of Swann. He's valiant and handy in a fight, be it lance, sword, or bow and arrow. Plus, he's bred well, coming from a prominent Stormland house, although Balon's older brother rides with Stannis.
The other Kingsguard newbie is less inspiring. Kettleblack is a head knight who has been on Bronn's payroll since before he began working with Cersei. He looks the part, but is hollow inside. The men replace Sirs Preston Greenfield and Boros Blount. Greenfield was killed in the riot, while Blount is a recent resident of the Rosby dungeons, having given up Tommen's the gold cloaks without much of a fight, a detail that has Queen Cersei fuming.
After the pomp and circumstance of the initiation, Tyrion pays a visit to the High Septon, a man he handpicked. He wants the High Septon to get the word out that Stannis doesn't support the Seven, and any person who supports Stannis defies the gods and their true king. Upon returning to his Solar, he's given a letter from Balon Greyjoy, the self-styled King of the Isles in the North. King Greyjoy wants to talk about kingdom borders and a possible alliance with the Lannisters.
Tyrion thinks that the Iron Fleet would be helpful right about now, but they're on the wrong side of the realm, and he's not sure about giving away half the realm thing anyway. Hallyne, the pyromancer, is shown into the Solar with an update on the wildfire count. The number causes Tyrion to question its legitimacy. Nearly 13,000 jars? That blows away even the best estimates. Hallyne swears they're not playing him false. Suddenly, the spells used in the process are working better than they have in centuries. Tyrion says he'd better be telling it true, or he'll have a date with Sir Ilyn Payne.
With that, Hallyne nearly sprints from the room. But Tyrion's day's not done. Next up is Sir Jacelyn Lord Jacelyn Bywater, I should say, not Sir. He's a lord now. He reports that Prince Tommen is healthy and happy. He has a plan for the young prince should Stannis win. However, as instructed, he won't even tell it to Tyrion. Finally, Tyrion gets to the last meeting of the day when Varys appears with a list of traitors to the crown. The Antlermen, as they call themselves. plan to open the old gate for Stannis' men. When they arrive, Tyrion recognizes many of the names, all rich men, traders, merchants, craftsmen. He signs a warrant for their arrest.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
Yeah. So it's quite a short chapter by Tyrion standards.
Busy, though. Very busy.
Oh, yeah. Not an awful lot happens. I mean, he's basically just wandering down to the Mudgate, overseeing, and then sort of heading back and having a few chats.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot to pass. One thing that stands out to me is Tyrion making the exact same mistake that Ned Stark made?
Yes, good point.
We complained many times about Ned dispersing his protectors far and wide, and that came back to burn him. Tyrion's most loyal followers are the mountain clans.
Right.
He has bronze sellswords, he sort of has the gold cloaks, but the mountain clans really do fight for Tyrion more than anybody else, and so they're the ones he sent out into the field to harry Stannis' troops. Clearly good for the war, but not necessarily good for Tyrion.
Exactly. Yeah, they're really the only, in quotes, army that King's Landing has at the moment. They do have the gold cloaks, but as Tyrion mentions, and we've mentioned in the past, watchmen aren't soldiers. They're not trained in combat fighting. They're trained in subduing drunken, disorderly conduct and things of that nature.
Right. You can imagine them firing the first few arrows off the walls down into the crowd, but once the walls start getting scaled by seasoned fighters, then it's suddenly they're watchmen again.
Yes, although I was thinking about it, I'm not sure how good the clansmen would be in a siege either.
Good point. Which is perhaps why he sent them out into the field
like you were getting at there. It does open him up to any kind of, I don't know if I want to say the word attack, but something with Cersei. You know, anything with Cersei. He doesn't have his personal protectors around any longer.
Right.
So
I don't think Cersei has it in for Tyrion the way she did for Ned.
Right.
She definitely has it in for him.
Right. Yes. She does seem to constantly be trying to get him out of the picture. But
and apparently she's aware of what's happened with Tommen. So she lost Myrcella basically against her will, and now Tommen's removal from King's Landing was supposed to be her plan, but it got perverted by Tyrion, and now basically Tommen is under Tyrion's charge.
Yes. I have some...
And she's aware of that.
Right. That's the thing. I have some questions about that when we get to that part in this chapter. But yes, you're right. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about the fact that was supposed to be her decision and her plan and her people looking over him, and now Tyrion has rearranged.
So just in many ways, her personal animosity to Tyrion is actually greater than her personal animosity to Ned, because Ned actually never stole her children away from her, just threatened to.
Renly sure suggested that he do that.
Right, and Ned fought against it, in fact.
And he's got the sellsword army, the 800 strong sellsword army, but as Bronn says, they'll kill for that knighthood you're offering them, but they won't die for it. And as we've seen in multiple instances so far in this story, as Tyrion says in this chapter, sellswords are notoriously fickle, which is quite the understatement from Tyrion. You could just ask Amory Lorch or Kat or Jamie about the fickle nature of sellswords.
Pretty much anyone who's ever paid a sellsword.
Right, basically, yes.
So Tyrion wants Shagga to use guerrilla tactics to strike the baggage train at night, to ambush and hang the scouts. This would be dispiriting to Stannis' men, for sure.
Yeah, and you'd have to think most of them on horseback would probably be Renly's converted men, because most of Stannis' men came by ship. So, unless, I guess they could have acquired horses for them, but you'd think that the majority of the people that aren't on the ships are Renly's men. So, you'd have to...
And certainly guerrilla warfare, you'd imagine, favours the clansmen. That's how they always fought.
Yeah.
They jumped upon unwitting travellers on the what's that road called?
The high road through the mountains of the moon.
The very thing. Yes.
Yeah, and you do have to wonder if they do as Tyrion instructs. By they, I mean the clansmen, and do these guerrilla warfare tactics. Will it test the commitment of these new men to Stannis? Will they be like, forget it, I'm tired of this, I'm going home. I'll back this guy in the first place. So, anyway, here's what they're up against, just because it's gotten kind of complicated about who's got whom and who is where. So, here's what the King's Landing is up against here. So, Stannis mostly got Renly's mounted force, because you remember, Renly outrode...
They all came to Storm's End.
Foot soldiers on his way to Storm's End, right. And Loras has gone back to Bitterbridge, where the foot soldiers seem to have reconvened. And when Loras left Storm's End, he left with 1/5 of Renly's knights. So, that's about... So if you figure at the peak of Renly's army, he had about 80,000. That would leave left him with about 60,000 at Bitterbridge, 20,000 at King's Landing. You subtract that 1/5, you've got about 16,000 members that joined Stannis' cause. Now, there's been a lot of chaos at Bitterbridge because, Varys told us that Randall Tarley put many of the men at Bitterbridge to the sword, a lot of them being Florence, because they were the first to side with Stannis. So we're dealing with about maybe 16 to 20,000, because you have to figure most of Stannis' men that came with him, like the true Stannis men, were seafaring houses from the Gullet, so probably not a ton of knights and men-at-arms in there. So maybe 4,000-ish, giving us roughly somewhere around 20,000 possibly. And we've also got no word from Littlefinger about the Tyrell alliance. So we don't know if anybody is going to be helping either side from the Tyrell alliance. Probably not going to be helping Stannis. So,
Probably not, right, because Loras still firmly blames Stannis for Renly's murder.
Right. So at worst, they're staying out of it. At best, they could come to the Lannisters' aid here, I guess.
Yeah, but you I think we mentioned last time we talked about this, that the Oakhearts and the Rowans, who were both in the Tyrell camp, have been seen north of the Mander, which we don't know what it means.
Right.
I mean, it could be to try and steal some riverlands. It could be to try and fight the Lannisters. It could be to try and negotiate with the Lannisters. All of those things are possible.
Yes, that's all on the table, because all we know is they've been seen. We don't know why they've been seen north of the Mander, which is a river that kind of divides the reach from the Riverlands.
Yeah.
Now,
so Tyrion reassures himself about the coming battle, that one man on the wall is worth 10 beneath it. That's something his father always said.
right.
But I'm not sure Tyrion totally believes this, and especially as he looks around and sees the kind of men who are going to be on top of these walls, he's understandably nervous.
Yeah, and so then he says, aside from those, the gold cloaks, which he's got 6,000, he thinks he can trust about 1,500. He's got about another 300 knights and men-at-arms and squires. So if that 10-to-1 ratio is true, it might be close for success, but that's a pretty big disparity, and we're not factoring in, that number doesn't factor in Stannis' navy, which heavily outnumbers the Royal Navy in King's Landing. So,
right, but can the Navy actually bring anything to bear in this battle? That's a question for me, because obviously navies now can make a difference because they can transport troops and they can throw things. They have big guns,
right? Yep.
But and they have airplanes on them. In these days, it feels like they're only troop transports, and we already know the troop dispositions here, and it's roughly 10-1, and so it's going to be close.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, with as many ships as Stannis has, and how heavily they outnumber the royal fleet, I guess they could shoot cannonballs into the walls, and
Maybe.
put holes in the walls to let the mounted and foot troops through, I guess. But
and not to jump to the end of the chapter, but then the plot that Varys unearthed, where some of the wealthier merchants were going to open the doors to Stannis, that could have been a tipping point here.
Yes.
I mean, like we say, it feels like it's going to be fairly close. And if someone on the inside were to betray the current occupants of King's Landing, that would tip this battle very quickly.
There would go that
Stannis'
10-1
favour.
rule out the window, pretty much.
Exactly. Now they're inside the castle, it's 1-1.
And the King's Landing is about 500,000 people. Can we be sure that Varys has tracked down all of the insurrection plots? There could be others that he's not aware of. So
yeah.
So he notices while he's outside of the Mudgate that the fishwives are very busy selling seafood, and they're selling them for 10 times what they were sold for before the war. And I was thinking, maybe some government regulation is needed here, some price gouging preventative measures, because there's no need to be selling them at 10 times the price in such a famine situation as the city is in. And it also, we've known for a while that there's been major food shortages in King's Landing, so maybe the government should have had more ships out on the water bringing in fish. Yes, bringing in seafood.
Because it was the one thing they could get hold of fairly
Yes.
easily. Yeah, you're right.
Yes, we keep talking about primarily the food is coming in from Rosby, but it could also be coming in from Blackwater Bay and the Blackwater River.
Right.
So, haven't heard any of that.
And like you say, it wouldn't take. I mean, not to get too sort of like bogged down in the economics of it, but you're right. Just have a few people representing the king down there saying, I want this all to be normal price.
Right.
Don't be gouging people.
Yes, like they do when there's a hurricane or something, and the state prevents gouging on the sale of plywood and nails and stuff.
Yeah. So Tyrion wants the lean-tos that lie against the city walls burned, the outside of the city walls. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
You don't really need to burn the ones on the inside. There's no reason. They'll just burn the walls, to be honest. In order that they don't provide any kind of cover for Stannis' men, Bronn says that the occupants of these shanties will not like this, and Tyrion sort of scoffs it off that'll give them something else to curse the evil monkey demon for.
Yeah, that's what the Street Prophet called him in that chapter after he met with Helene, and then he met with, I think, his cousin. And then he saw that Street Prophet who was bizarrely accurate about all the things that were going on in the Red Keep.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to have taken it as his personal moniker, I guess. But I get wanting to remove the structures. I mean, gives Stannis' men cover from attacks. He's saying they would barely need ladders with all the lean-tos and stuff built up around. Right. But, I guess it does give them some sort of protection when they would be trying to siege the walls. But we do see him trying to protect the small folk. He tells Bronn, not entirely with a lot of passion, but he does tell him, don't kill these people and no raping, but he's still going to come out as the bad guy, which he does fully expect. He says just one more thing that they're going to curse me over, but it does make you worry that if they do manage to successfully defend the city against Stannis, he's going to be facing possibly just as big an issue within the walls with 500,000 angry people who all blame him for their woes.
Yeah. But you've got to imagine that he means for Bronn to give the people warning.
He does. He does say,
get out, we're going to burn these down because they would be advantageous to our enemies. But what's their alternative, these people? This is where they live.
Right.
Their alternative is to move into the city, which is rat-infested and...
dangerous.
People are starving
right,
in there.
Yes.
They've got nowhere to live in there. They would just be refugees inside. Or I guess they could go somewhere else. They could wander off into the woods. None of those are very appealing to those people. So they are going to be bent out of shape about this, for sure. But then the alternative you say to them is, look, we can leave these here, but we're going to set them on fire the minute those guys arrive without any warning.
That's a good point. Probably pour some boiling oil over the over the walls. Yeah. But
yeah, but yeah, PR is definitely becoming a problem for Tyrion, and whilst it doesn't matter now when the city is likely to fall to Stannis, it might, like you say, if Tyrion wins, it could start to matter because he's built up a lot of enemies amongst the citizens.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of things he could do, and maybe one thing that Tyrion smartly does in this chapter is he tells the High Septon, hey, I want it widely known that Stannis is not supporting the Seven. He will come here. He's going to burn down the Sept of Baelors. I want you to make sure all these people know this. Maybe if he did more public, pious things, that might help to improve. Like, hey, look, I'm the religious one. I'm the one who follows the Seven. I'm a good guy. And, that's free. Can only help to improve their image. And so, I don't know, that's something he could try doing anyway.
Yeah. It is, Tyrion then sort of like turns his attention to the fall of Winterfell, which, it's categorically good news for the Lannisters because it definitely distracts Robb from his pillaging and destroying the Westerlands, which is the Lannisters' home.
Right, yeah.
But Tyrion can't help but see this as somehow wrong. Having been there, having met the Starks, knowing them, he feels that there's something wrong about them losing Winterfell.
Well, yeah, which, if you consider what he went through at the hands of Cat, maybe a bit surprising.
She's a Tully through and through.
That's right. Yeah, it definitely is a big boon for the Lannisters, no doubt. But I think he, all the way removed from King's, all the way in King's Landing, so far removed from this, is stunned by the treachery of the act by Theon. It's stunned to the point of feeling sorry for the Starks.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's probably also feeling a bit sorry for Theon because Tyrion's smart enough to realize that the Greyjoys can't hold the North. And no matter how long they do hold it, the people will never be theirs, which is something we've brought up too.
Right.
And, he waxes poetically a bit about the Winterfell Godswood, and he thinks about the castle might be the Ironborns, but the Godswood will never be theirs, no matter how long they're there. And I think that the Godswood here is a metaphor for the hearts and souls of the Northerners. That's
Yeah, I mean, and the more you think about it, the more you realize that Theon has achieved nothing for the Iron Islands by doing this, other than the animosity of the Starks.
Right.
And basically signed his own death warrant, because but he has twisted the whole politics of the Seven Kingdoms, because he really has made life very difficult for Robb now.
Right. Sure.
Robb really has to either swallow the fact that Winterfell is now in someone else's hands until he's dealt with what he's dealing with, or he has to give up his hopes and dreams for the Riverlands, for the Westerlands, and come home to deal with Theon. Either way, Theon's gonna get it. I mean, either sooner or later. Those are the only two choices.
Yeah. And so Tyrion thinks that now Robb must turn home. This is a great reprieve for the West, but maybe he didn't get a full report of just how lightly Winterfell is held at the moment by the Ironborn, because we've discussed
but you feel like Tyrion would have got as accurate a report as Robb got.
Right. True. Yes. Good point. Yeah. I mean, we felt pretty confident that Sir Roderick can retake it when he returns from Torrhen Square. So, if Robb gets an accurate idea of how lightly it's held, he might decide the same thing. I don't need to go back. Roderick and some of the other lords up there can handle this. Calling the Umbers to come help handle it or something. But what might be a bigger concern is Moat Cailin, because if that falls to Victarion, then it really could be an issue getting back north at some point if they don't go immediately.
Right. And in many ways, actually, Theon perhaps has screwed the Iron Islanders a little bit by taking Winterfell so suddenly, so soon, because now Rob's sending some troops north, I'm sure of that. And one of the things he might say is, make sure that Moat Cailin is defended so we don't lose that, so that we can all come home.
Sure, yeah, it'd be a timing thing.
We
now.
know we're being attacked by people who could reach Moat Cailin. Let's make sure that's fortified.
Right. Yeah. He could call on his allies, the Freys. That he's supposed to marry a Frey daughter. They're not too far from Moat Cailin. Maybe they could send some troops up there. Now, I've got a question about the next thing that happens in this chapter. So Tyrion gets back to the Tower of the Hand, and there's like a dozen trader ship captains waiting for him, and they're angry about their ships having been seized. But it's never quite clear what they've been seized for. Either, there's two options, right? Either the royal fleet must be so badly outnumbered that they're commandeering trader ships to try and turn them into warships, or he's doing what Balon did when Theon first arrived at Pike, and not allowing any ships that have arrived to leave so that no word can spread on what's going on.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or two if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
Slightly alternative idea for you here. What about using the ships to simply block the Blackwater Rush?
Blockade type thing.
Just a physical blockade.
Could be, yeah.
He definitely doesn't have enough ships of his own to do that, so steal everyone who happens to be in town's ships and just use them to block it.
Sure.
Because, like we said, we don't think that the ships can really offer that much support to the invasion other than troop landing, so make them land the troops further away than the troops would want to be. Don't let them come all the way up to the walls.
Good point. Yep, that's a third option I had not considered.
So the two new Kingsguard that are being invested are interesting. So Balon Swann is noble and stalwart, seems a perfect fit for the job. The somewhat odious and rather treacherous Osmund Kettleblack, less so, although honestly quite like some of the existing ones. But Kettleblack is a big unit. He's measured in at 6'6", which is 2 meters in this chapter. That's a big dude.
It is, yeah. He's very.
I mean, that may not be mountain size, but yeah. So that could be good news for guarding the king, but also good news for fans of Tyrion, because Kettleblack is not the lackey of Cersei that she believes him to be. He's on Tyrion's payroll. Right. So
everything she tries, he's already outthought her on it. So here's the swap outs, basically. I mean, I guess you could go either way here, but so Sir Balon Swann is replacing Preston Greenfield. Now, Preston Greenfield was killed in the riot, and Jalabar Zoe saw him, Preston, turning back and going to try and save the High Septon. So, that's rather brave and valiant of him. So, maybe there's a bit of an equal trade there between Balon Swann. Now, Preston was overlooked. His body was overlooked because they were looking for someone in white armor and cloak, and his armor was rusty red from the terrible pummeling that he faced when he did try and go back. So, it's so that's what's going on there. And then with what's his name? With Osmund Kettleblack, he is replacing Sir Boros Blount. And now Sir Boros Blount, we know, had no hesitation to beat Sansa. She thought him the worst of the Kingsguard. And he was ready to strip and beat her in front of all before Tyrion stopped it in that that chapter. And after the riot, he didn't want to go back out to try and find Sansa. So unlike Preston Greenfield, who willingly chose to dive back into the riot to try and save the High Septon, he was like, I'm not going back out there. You kidding me?
Yeah.
So
this has got to be good news for Sansa, because Kettleblack, being on Tyrion's payroll, should presumably be a little bit more restrained with the beatings of Sansa.
You would think.
Least. If he's noble and stalwart, he would not do these things.
Right, or at least do it at the minimal possible to not lose his own head.
But I mean, I think if I were him, and I think, I think I would make the point to the king, this is not guarding you.
Right.
My job is to guard you.
Right.
That is a child you want me to hit. I'm not doing that. The Hound gets away with it.
Right. Yeah. He's the king's pet, though.
Yeah, true.
Now, one thing I'm curious about is it'd be interesting to see if we find out how a hedge knight, because Osmund Kettleblack is a hedge knight, how he managed to get mixed up with the Queen Regent in the first place.
Well, I think she was out looking for those people.
I guess.
Basically.
But yeah, was he introduced to her by a common associate, or did she look through the ads, in the back of the newspaper? How did she manage to get up with this
hedge knight seeks white cloak?
Right.
So back to Balon Swann. We've met Balon a couple of times. He's the second son of Gullion Swann, who's head of House Swann at Stonehelm in the Stormlands. Stonehelm is actually in the Dornish Marches. It's in the Stormlands, but it's in the Dornish Marches. The lords of this region, which sort of like spans the Stormlands, the Reach, and Dorne, are known as the Marcher Lords. They border all three of those regions, so they've bounced back and forth over the centuries, and as such, they've learned to hedge their bets.
Right.
Gullion has a son fighting on every side, basically. Tyrion jokes that he expects to find one fighting for the Starks before too long. So, but yes, the Swans intend to survive regardless of who wins the throne. So we met Balon specifically. He was at the Hands tournament that Ned never wanted.
Right.
He lost his joust to Gregor Clegane, which is no disgrace. Gregor Clegane is the Mountain.
But he did defeat Alan before he met.
Oh, he did.
The
Yes,
Stark household man, Alan.
And he was second, I believe, in the archery competition to another marcher, Angui.
Yeah.
The marchers are fabled for their archery skills. So he's a fighter, but his loyalties are very interesting. So when Peter Baelish was advising Ned to seize the throne, he said that Balon Swann and his men would come over to Ned's side.
Right.
Ned obviously didn't act on that.
Right.
But that was something that Peter Baelish was confident about.
Yeah, he did. He chose the gold cloaks instead of considering.
He did, exactly,
Swann.
yeah. And more recently, Tyrion also heard about Swann joking at a meal with Tanda Stokeworth. Somebody said, would raise a glass to the king, and Balon Swann said, well, we'll need 3 glasses then.
Right. Which is a big departure for from that to now being a member of the Kingsguard. So.
Right, but Varys reported it to Tyrion, and Tyrion said, it's just a joke, let it slide.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that that's how Balon thinks.
Right.
And then also, so jumping back in time a little bit now, when Sansa begged for leniency in the throne room, when Ned was still a captive, when she walked into the throne room that day, it was Balon Swann that prevented Dontos Hollard from hailing Sansa. Right. He was going, oh, hey, Sansa. And Balon Swann pulled his hand down and said, don't do that.
Yes, that's because everybody was looking at their hands or their feet. Or
everybody else was avoiding her eye.
Anywhere but at Sansa.
Exactly. But later in that same scene, Peter Baelish is speaking amiably with the two of them, Dontos Hollard and Balon Swann, when Joffrey enters the throne room.
Oh, yeah. We've also seen Balon alongside Cersei several times, especially in this book. Most recently, he carried the Lion Banner back from the docks, the trip where the riot happened after seeing Marcella off.
Yeah.
So he's been around her.
So spitballing just a little bit, I think we can assume that Sir Dontos Hollard is loyal to Cersei. To Sansa.
Yeah.
If anybody in this book could be considered loyal, it's got to be Dontos Hollard. Surely, it's hard to find anyone who's true is Balon Swann in cahoots with him? Are they friends?
Because
Are they...
of the interaction and in the throne room?
Just a little bit. I mean, at the time, I just thought it was like, dude, don't wave to her. She's got cooties.
Yes. She's got the scarlet letter.
But now I'm hearing all these other things. Like Peter Baelish was convinced that Swann would come over to Ned's side. Is he actually Team Sansa a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Right.
One other little thing about that was that when Sansa received the invite to rendezvous in the Godswood, she thought it was from Balon Swann.
True.
She thought that's who it had come from.
Yeah.
So he maybe has been given her signals that he's on her side.
Yeah.
It turned out to be Dontas Hollard. It's fine. He's just as good, apart from being drunk and not very brave. And then, so overseeing all this is Peter Baelish involved. We know Peter Baelish has got a very big soft spot for Sansa Stark.
Indeed. Right. Yeah.
And are Dontas Hollard and Balon Swann both working for Peter Baelish in trying to keep Sansa safe? All in all, I'm thinking this is good news for Sansa, that he's another Kingsguard.
I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah. You make a very compelling argument for that conspiracy theory.
I'm not really making an argument. I'm just trying to figure out who Balon Swann is from all of the bits and pieces he's appeared. He's one of the things that make this book great for me is that when I read this chapter, I was like, who the hell's Balon Swann? So I went back and I read all of the previous bits where he showed up, and I was like, oh my god, this character is actually... He's a mover and a shaker, and I barely remember his name because he only crops up now and again.
Yes.
He's just a little thread running through the story that's like, what?
That's the whole point of this podcast, is because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who, when they read it, were thinking the same as you, and we're filling in the gaps for you. Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I'll be very excited to see if you are correct or how correct you might be. Good stuff. I like it. Now, so he at the ceremony for the gold, not gold cloaks, the white cloaks. Tyrion is hoping to catch a glimpse of Shay with Lully's Stokeworth, but unfortunately, no Lully's at the ceremony, therefore no Shay. And Varys had told Tyrion when he was proposing this idea that Shay be Lully's handmaid, that Lully's doesn't leave her chambers much ever since the riot where she was raped and probably became very scared of being outside of the castle anymore. So, yeah.
So we meet the new High Septon very briefly. We don't know what his name is or anything. They're just always called the High Septon, but he was Tyrion's choice for the job, and that's going to help Tyrion in trying to sort of build up, like we talked about, a little PR for the Lannister cause here, that Stannis is opposed to the Gods of the Seven. His evidence for this is the burning of the Godswood at Storm's End, and of course the Godswood is nothing to do with the religion of the Seven, so that'll be a little bit of a sell, but if the High Septon's his man, then he'll get what he wants, I'm sure.
Yeah, the way he bridges the gap there is he says if he doesn't, if he'll do that for the old gods, he'll do the same to the new gods as well. So,
I'll admit, limited experience in the sort of politics of religion is that typically religions see each other as sort of enemies. They don't see the enemy of my enemy as my friend, but, the new gods would see the burning of the old gods wood as being like, oh, that's okay. Yeah. I'm all right with that.
No, it's kind of unusual that. So Tyrion says, he doesn't say it out loud, but he tells us in his thinking that the new High Septon was his choice. It's kind of unusual that a hand of the king choose the High Septon. It's usually high-ranking members of the clergy called the most devout. They come together to select a High Septon. Now, it has happened in the past that kings have chosen High Septons. In fact, once, I believe, an 8-year-old boy was chosen as a High Septon. But it is kind of rare that a hand of the king would just be like, that's our new High Septon.
I'm thinking Tyrion was using bribery and his machinations.
Possibly. Very possibly.
So we learned that Jesselyn Bywater's made a plan for Tommen should King's Landing fall, but he won't even tell Tyrion that, which makes good sense because Tyrion thinks that he might get tortured for that information should King's Landing fall. So not knowing works for him.
So
and then
remember I said I had something to mention when we got to the part about Tommen being taken.
On.
So we both agree that Cersei is aware of this because she made Joffrey strip Boros Blount of his white cloak for cowardice over...
That's why we know it, yes. That's why we know.
So Cersei's aware that the Gold Cloaks accosted Tommen's escort and took him from them, but she seems to be rather angry at Boros Blount. We haven't heard about any particular anger at Tyrion and Bywater for that. There was no mention of it in this... in his thoughts or actions or anything. I found that odd.
I wonder if there's been some... I mean, obviously, we're not with them 24/7. Has Cersei confronted him and Tyrion said, look, your plan was rock solid, but now he's being looked after by proper Kingsguards who aren't cowards.
Maybe.
Like Blunt was.
That makes sense.
Also, I've built a plan for his escape, which even I don't know, and maybe Cersei's kind of forgiving him for this.
Yeah, that's possible.
But yeah, it's a good point. I mean, or maybe she's plotting something. Now he's got rid of all his mountain clans. Maybe she's going to come for him seriously.
Good point.
By the way, Blunt's capitulation is funny and very much on point. He, as you said, he's Sansa's chief tormentor, and he also laughed when Barristan Selmy was ousted. He is basically, and always has been, a cowardly bully.
Right.
And let's hope he rots in those Rosby cells. Or, better yet, gets dragged back to King's Landing to face Cersei.
Yes.
She's mad.
He's probably happy to rot in a Rosby cell rather than come back to King's Landing at this point.
So Balon Greyjoy wrote to Joffrey to fix the borders and discuss an alliance.
This one, it's quite hypocritical of him to make such an alliance. First of all, he had a bird in hand with the Stark alliance, but threw it away in favor of war and treachery. And if he had aligned himself with the Starks, like what Theon originally proposed when he showed up at Pike, he could have claimed the West, as Theon suggested that he do. But now he wants to align with the Lannisters, who currently are dangerously close to outright loss on all fronts. Stannis is marching on King's Landing, Robb is raiding the West, Tywin is cut off from the West, and they have no other alliances at the moment but a fake one with the Martells. So, first of all, why would he choose them? And this is the hypocritical part. Where's that whole iron price thing he went on about so much when Theon, back in Theon 1, proposed this idea of allying with the Starks and taking the West, and he said, I'll pay the iron price for my kingdom. I'm not going to make an alliance and be given the West. So,
well, he could argue that they stole the North. They paid the iron price for the North, and now they want to hold there.
Yeah, I guess.
They'll make an alliance to not, lose any of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is, to me, Balon Greyjoy's nature to be inconsistent.
I guess so. That's one thing we're learning about him, yeah. And doesn't it make more sense, if you were planning on doing this, to talk to the Lannisters first about an alliance and offer to distract Robb by attacking the North, than to do it second and then say...
But remember that Theon changed the plan on Balon. Balon's plan was to take the North, but in sort of increments, and by taking Winterfell, Theon brought everything to a head very quickly.
Well, that's
and
true.
So maybe...
Yeah, but you'd think if he's going to then say, hey, Lannisters, I want to create an alliance with you, maybe do that first, and then get them on board.
I agree. If you don't like what Theon brings to you, I'm not going to attack the West while it's vulnerable. Then you straight away write to the Lannisters and say, I'm not attacking the West. Can we have an alliance, please?
Right. I am planning on attacking the North, which will take Robb off your
And you'll like that,
back.
won't you?
Yes. Exactly. Anyway.
So when Tyrion talks to Hallyne, the pyromancer, Hallyne kind of ham-fistedly sort of says, "You don't suppose there are dragons, do you? Because of his yield on his cook is way higher than usual, and he's not sure why his magic is working better." He has read that magic work better in the presence of dragons, and so he sort of says, "You don't suppose there are dragons around, do you?" Which just feels a little bit ham-fisted, to be honest, I've got to say.
I hadn't thought about that until I saw it in the notes, and I was like, yeah, you're right, it kind of is.
I will say, this is the Balon Swann thing is why I love this book, but this is kind of all right, we get it. The dragons bring more magic to the world.
Right. I like your suggestion of rewriting in here. Did you mention that already?
Yes. I didn't mention it, but I thought he should have said, "We haven't seen these kinds of yields since the time of dragons."
Right.
That's a little bit more subtle, still pointing to the same thing, but literally saying, "You don't suppose there are dragons, do you?" Is a little too on point, given what we know.
Yeah, and so here are the numbers that to kind of put things in context here. In Tyrion 5, Hallyne mentioned that there was 7,840 jars, including 4,000 from Ares Day. So to that point, they'd made less than 4,000 themselves. He felt confident that they could keep to their promise of making 10,000 jars by the time it was needed. They're already nearly 3,000 over that. So now they went from making less than 4,000 themselves to 9,000 new jars. So you can understand why Tyrion is like, whoa, what is with these numbers?
I wonder, I mean, having a little bit of a background in chemistry and also being in the middle of watching Breaking Bad, I find this sort of yields thing to be
You're an expert on multiple levels here.
I wonder, but I've never done chemistry and
spells,
meth cooking with magic previously. I wonder if it just comes out so fast. You're like, more jars. But we lost a few, but we've got 13,000. We believe that the news of the dragons hasn't reached yet. We know that there are now captains who know about this, but we don't think they've reached Westeros. People would be talking about it if they had.
It's a long way away. Danny's basically on the other side of the known world right now in Karth. So the news of the Antler Men, this is interesting to me. So we know there's been a lot of unrest in King's Landing, but we basically saw it as confined to the commoners who are literally starving to death. There's an image in this chapter of a rotten fish being thrown at Tyrion, landing on the floor, splatting open, and then hungry children running to eat the splatted open rotting fish. Yeah, that's terrible.
Stomach churning on multiple levels.
Right.
But these Antler Men seem to be relatively wealthy merchants and tradesmen who intend to insurrect when Stannis arrives and open a gate, which would be absolutely huge for Stannis. So huge kudos to Varys, if you're Team Lannister here, for uncovering that plot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or for making it up and using it to cover, to kill some people he doesn't like.
That's also an option, yes.
Yeah.
Now, they mentioned that opening the Old Gate, which is along the northwest part of the wall, actually kind of near where Chitaya's brothel is. So it's on the far side of the Hill of Rainies. And since the attacking will be coming from the south, you would think it would be more advantageous to open the King's Gate or the Lion's Gate, which is along the southwest part, but maybe this is an access thing or a defense thing, being easier to open a gate facing away from the main action of the battle than one that might be more heavily guarded facing the primary action of the battle. But another thing, you had mentioned Varys, he might have more than his own neck as a reason to want to prevent Stannis from taking the Iron Throne, because we're pretty sure that he and Illyrio Mopatis seem to have a plan to reestablish Targaryen rule in Westeros. And Stannis taking the throne, and therefore calming the realm, might stabilize it more than they're wanting.
Yeah, and like we've said, the opening of this gate would tip this battle decisively in Stannis' favour. We think that battle is fairly evenly matched, without this open gate. So these two sides might destroy themselves on these walls,
Right.
leaving the door open to a Targaryen return more readily.
Sure.
So yeah, you can see that Varys might be working towards that. One of the people that gets mentioned as being a member of these Antler Men is the Master Armourer. And that feels a little portentous to me. Has he been sabotaging this chain that Tyrion's been building?
Good question. We've heard from him back when Tyrion announced when he announced to all the smiths and armorers what they were going to be doing, working on this chain. He said that chain making is meant for the common smiths, not for masters, and offered to make Tyrion armor. And Tyrion said, "You will make chains, or you'll wear them." So I guess
so. It's a little bit of payback for that.
I guess
perhaps.
so. Yeah.
Interesting. I did not notice.
But you're right.
Anyway,
he could be sabotaging the chain. Very well, could be doing
right.
that.
You know how strong a chain is? It's as strong as its weakest.
Exactly. It only takes one weak link.
Exactly. All right. You got some background for us?
I have a little bit of background. So Tyrion tells Shagga that he won't be fighting milk snakes and painted dogs in the Kingswood. Now, those are both other clans in the Mountains of the Moon. He didn't literally mean milk snakes and painted dogs.
Well, he might have, and just happened upon two names of mountain clans.
So the painted dog's primary claim to fame has to do with Roland Arryn, the fourth Arryn king of Mountain and Vale. Now, we told you ages ago, back in Cat 7 in Game of Thrones, that King Roland had the idea to build the Eyrie because he didn't find that the Gates of the Moon to be up to par with the other castles of the High Lords around Westeros. He came to that conclusion because he was fostered with an Andal king in the Riverlands, and unlike many Valemen, he traveled around the realm quite a bit. So he began the process of building the Eyrie and its way castles. Unfortunately, his 26-year reign was only long enough for him to see the beginning of the foundation of the Eyrie being laid. Because on a trip through the Mountains of the Moon, he was caught in a surprise attack by the painted dogs. They pulled him from his horse and crushed his head with a stone maul before he could draw his longsword. His son finished construction of the Eyrie.
Interesting.
Bit of a reach.
Comparison with the television show.
A little bit of a reach there, but,
No. They got a mention, and I didn't even notice the mention, so thank you for bringing it to my attention. I appreciate it.
Quite welcome.
Comparison with the television show. Tommen hasn't been removed from King's Landing. He's still very much there. Jacelyn Bywater as a character was entirely dropped in the TV show. The content of this chapter is mostly brought into a single scene with Tyrion, Bronn, and Varys. Bronn having been made commander of the Gold Cloaks, which is another. That's how Bywater was dropped.
Right.
They are reading books on defending castles. A comical debate on how to pronounce Chivialthan. That Varys clearly wins because Tyrion and Bronn have no idea, and some general verbal jousting between them. They believe that Stannis, knowing King's Landing, which is a point I hadn't thought about, Stannis does know the lay of King's Landing. He's been there many times.
Yep.
He's been... so that he'll attack the Mudgate. It's not the strongest, it's close to the river. But Tyrion, according to the TV show, has a plan.
All right.
So,
okay.
Perhaps it's burning down the shanty town that's outside the Mudgate. I don't know.
Right. That's the plan. All right. I'm glad it was you that said that word, because anyone that listened to the Outtakes episode that I published, well, when you're listening to this, it'll have been last week, our week off, will know my trouble with pronouncing pretty much anything.
Well, you'll notice that in the notes, I've got it written phonetically because I did not want to screw that one up too badly. So pedantry, I'm just going to say that if you're going to burn the shantytown on the outside of King's Landing walls, you might as well do it when Stannis is there. I mean, like, douse them with wildfire.
Sure, yeah, I can see that.
And then really tell the people, you've got until, like, they appear on this beach, and then you better be out of here.
Better be out of there one way or another. Yeah.
It seems wasteful. I mean, I guess there's always a danger, like you said, you could climb up those buildings and you'd be practically at the top of it, but it's not hard to be ready to burn those.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat.
You could make the argument that it would be better to have a clear path to see, but they're elevated on the top of the walls. I don't know that would
Right.
provide them a great advantage. So, yeah, I see what you're saying.
I would let them climb up on there and then set them on fire. That would hurt a lot.
Good point. Good point.
News and notes. I'd like to just thank all the listeners for sticking with us over the week off. It was a real boon.
Yes.
We're grateful for
Very
it.
much.
It won't happen again for as long as humanly possible. And we're going to have a guest producer this week. My son Lucas is going to produce this episode, so don't be afraid to let us know how it sounded. We're hoping he can share the load with us going forward.
That would be great. Also, big news for Spotify listeners.
Uh-huh.
You
I listen to us on Spotify.
Did you know that you can now go out and rate us on Spotify?
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, you can rate on Spotify now. I don't believe you can leave reviews yet. Hopefully you can prove me wrong, but I don't think you can leave reviews yet. But I know you can leave ratings now. So please go out and just put your finger across to 5 stars or however many stars. I haven't actually gone and checked myself. But please go out and rate us.
Probably 5.
Yes, hopefully you saw 5 out of 10. And so there you go. They're finally making some progress with that on Spotify. So please go out and rate us on Spotify. We have a chance to, really make some ground with all the other similar type podcasts out there.
And we got a review on our Buy Me a Coffee site, right?
That's right. Yes.
From Kay.
Yes, the letter
Who
K.
said-
Oh, and by the
Just
way,
letter K?
the letter K is our one of our very newest monthly sustainers. So thank you very much, Kay.
Oh, thank you, Kay. I appreciate that. This is my favourite podcast. Thanks for putting in so much time and effort to make such a great show. That was Kay, not me. Happens to be true. I might have said the same thing, but that would be immodest.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you so much for both your be joining us as a sustainer and for the wonderful review.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. All right, let's conclude. The defence of King's Landing seems to be coming together. The mountain clans will obviously inconvenience Stannis' army. The wildfire is more than enough and seems to be ready. Will the Ampler men's machinations have an impact? Or has that been nipped in the bud?
Right. Could there be other groups out there? If there's one, there's very possibly more. So yeah, it does. It seems like Stannis did everything required to give Tyrion enough time to get prepared.
If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. The Baratheon brothers cannot organize a war.
Somehow they won a throne. I'm not sure how that happened based on what we've seen.
Well, apparently the big fat drunk one was the one with a bit of gumption.
Right. He was the one
the other two were...
who jumped to action.
Yeah. Tommen seems to be safe. I like the plan of keeping Tyrion in the dark of what would happen to Tommen.
Yeah, I'd have to think it's more of a Tommen safety thing than a reemergence as king thing. I mean, you'd have to figure if they lose in King's Landing and Stannis sits on the Iron Throne, how many supporters would Tommen actually have at that point? I mean, the Lannisters
everyone who
likely
like
lost
Stannis.
the war, so his family would have likely fled or been killed, and with Stannis on the throne, it likely means that most of the realm was going to start to believe that incest rumor to be true because, as we know, history is written by the victors.
Let me take a stab here, though. We know Stannis is inflexible about his former enemies, but he's also a little bit flexible about his former enemies, as has been shown with his recent acquisition of all of Renly's troops,
right,
who he sees as traitors. Let me give an argument here. King's Landing is overwhelmed. Stannis takes the Iron Throne. Cersei and Tyrion and Joffrey all die in that, for sure.
Uh-huh.
Tywin says, you know what? I was fighting because I genuinely believed that my grandson was the son of Robert Baratheon. You have now opened my eyes to the fact that I was wrong about this. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to go back to Castle Rock. Really, you've got my... I'll bend the knee.
Uh-huh. I'm not sure Stannis is the kind of guy that's like, okay. I get it. You're sorry. I accept.
But he has shown himself to be capable of it. So I think that's definitely Tywin's best bet.
He's got that in his back pocket if all else fails. The grovel and plead
then,
ignorance.
If that happens, then Little Tommen in the Wind becomes the next battle for the Iron Throne.
Maybe.
Because when Tywin licks his wounds back in Casterly Rock and says, you know what, it's really not fair, my grandchild should be on the throne. I wonder if I have a grandson left. So, who's this blonde kid?
Blonde kid, that's the key. Blonde kid.
Yeah. So neither of the new Kingsguard is exactly what they appear, it seems. At least not to... Maybe Balon Swann is not who he appears to anyone. And certainly Osmund Kettleblack is not what he appears to
Cersei.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I like your theory on Balon Swann. That's really cool. I like it.
It's not really a theory. I don't know what he's going to be. I just think his character deserves some paying attention to, because he may not be just mindless.
Just a wallflower. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, very good points. I like it a lot. Yeah, the Greyjoy peace offering with the Lannisters. Sure, their ships could have been helpful. Of course, they were on the wrong side of Westeros, so they are not helpful in the least. But it just seems like you're right. Balon makes a lot of back and forth. He's very inconsistent because that very much goes against the things he was telling Theon.
By the way, you know what I'm doing? When the Seven Kingdoms are settled and I am king, okay, when I'm atop the Iron Throne as I ought to be,
you'll make me Hand of the King.
Of course, goes without saying. But as Hand of the King, one of your first orders of duty will be to build me a big, wide canal across the neck.
Right. Why not?
So that my fleets can get around a little bit easier.
Yes, I like it. It should have been done by now.
Exactly. And you know who's the right man for this? Is Walder Frey. Because Walder Frey would charge people for getting through that canal.
Absolutely.
Left and right. He'd be like, we're only building one canal and I'm in charge of it.
You put a castle on each side with the bridge in between.
Exactly. He'd put locks every 100 yards and charge every one of them.
Yeah, it's like being on a toll road there. You got to pay at each lock.
Exactly. And so has Tyrion exposed himself to his sister's plots? He's definitely annoyed her. We know that for sure.
He sure has, and he has gotten rid of his personal protectors, which is not ideal. So, he does have to remember that he's only acting Hand of the King. His father is the true Hand of the King. So, he's not quite as stable as he might like to believe. So, we'll see.
As always, you can reach us at ghosts.harrenhal@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter @ghostsharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and the ever-active Discord server.
That's right. And you can also go out and buy us, not buy us some merch, you can go out and buy some merch at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. And you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Both would really help us out, and we very much appreciate that. And if you please go out and leave us a positive review and a 5-star rating, we very much would appreciate that. Nothing helps spread the word more than that. And if you do leave us a review, we just might read it on a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.